Leaked footage from the 2012 Republican National Convention in Tampa, Florida. Check it out.
Friends, this election is about more than who gets what. It is about who we are. It is about what we believe and what we stand for as Americans. There is a religious war going on in this country. It is a cultural war as critical to the kind of nation we shall be as the Cold War itself, for this war is for the soul of America. We must take back our cities and take back our culture and take back our country.
That was, of course, not next year's Republican National Convention in Tampa. That was 20 years ago in Houston, Texas. MSNBC's own Pat Buchanan, then a presidential candidate, he dropped out of the 1992 presidential race in exchange for that terrifying primetime speaking slot, in which he declared that a religious war was on. What he called a culture war was on in America. And it was not only on, it was a good idea. Pat's candidacy was probably never going to get him elected president, but it was a great vehicle for celebrating and for locking in the culture war political tactics that were already at the heart of how the Republican Party and the conservative movement got their work done.
It doesn't help matters when primetime TV has Murphy Brown, a character who supposedly epitomizes today's intelligent, highly paid professional woman, mocking the importance of fathers by bearing a child alone and calling it just another lifestyle choice.
Many homosexuals average 16 different sex partners every month. 182 partners per year. I know of not one homosexual organization that has advocated abstinence from engaging in incredibly offensive and revolting conduct that has led to the proliferation of AIDS.
The money's available for the wealthy stars to finance the arts if they want to, but they should not come here to ask us to raise taxes. This is not about money. This is about an elite group who want the government to define that art is good, and it's explicitly wrong.
When the world looks at America these days, all too often they see a moral swamp, a culture promoting sex and violence. No wonder our enemies think they can defeat us.
Republicans waging what Pat Buchanan called the culture war was a hallmark of Republican politics for more than a decade. But the conventional political wisdom has been that it paid diminishing returns over time. The last gasp is broadly thought of as 2004, when national Republicans got anti-gay marriage initiatives on the ballot in states across the country as what they hoped would be a get-out-the-vote effort to help the re-election prospects of George W. Bush. The anti-gay marriage initiatives themselves mostly passed, or in fact, they all passed. But when you crunched the numbers after that election, it turns out that those initiatives didn't really work to drive up turnout for George Bush. To the extent that the Republican Party tried the same strategy again, sort of half-heartedly in 2006, it definitely didn't work. Republicans got walloped that year. And in 2008, frankly, culture wars were not really significant national issues at all. In the Beltway, the term culture war isn't even really used much anymore. The common wisdom is that these issues just aren't politically salient now. The Republican Party is no longer waging culture war for political advantage. But here's where the yawning divide opens between the way people talk about what they're doing and what they are actually doing. Republicans have learned to not speak about culture war issues to general audiences anymore. They're so focus grouped to within an inch of their lives that the only thing they'll talk about in public is the horrible, horrible, horrible Democrats and
creating jobs and
focusing on jobs in the economy.
Unshackle our economy and create millions of new jobs.
Right. They have all hired Frank Luntz, right? They know that's what they're supposed to be talking about. They know that's what the American people want to hear from them. If you only listen to what Republicans say to the D.C. press, say to the Beltway media, if you only listen to what they say to the banks of microphones outside the House chamber, you too might think that the culture wars are over, that all of our fights are fiscal now. But it is important to watch what they do and not just listen to what they say. And it's important to watch what they say when they think the mainstream isn't listening, when they think they're just talking to their base. When the Republicans took control of the House this month, we thought that H.R. 1 was their new rules package for the House. It turns out it's not that. H.R. 1 is still yet to be determined. H.R. 2, of course, was repeal Obamacare. H.R. 3, the next thing they proposed, abortion, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act. Who remembers John Boehner campaigning by saying the first thing House Republicans would do if they got control of the House would be to repeal health reform, and the second thing they'd do would be abortion? That is not what they campaigned on. That is not what they said they'd do, at least to national audiences, but it is what they've done. Republican Congressman Mike Pence of Indiana said today that he's not going to run for president. We'll have more on that in a moment. But 3 days before bowing out of the race, Mike Pence left the Beltway press twittering about where he stood on spending while he went to go address an anti-abortion rally.
Some would have us focus our energy on jobs and spending. But as you attest today by your presence, you know we must not remain silent when great moral battles are being waged. Let's start by denying all federal funding for abortion at home and abroad.
Jobs and spending? Yes, I understand. They tell us it's important. But abortion, that's where we have to start. Beltway press coverage right now is all about Republicans proposing these big aggregate spending cuts for the national budget. Whether they're realistic or not, what are the differences between the different Republican proposals, what are the specific cuts, though, that they've actually proposed. Rather than the big aggregate, how much can they cut debate, which is getting so much Beltway press coverage, what have they specifically proposed cutting? If you lived through the culture wars the first time around, the details will look familiar. They want to cut the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, bye-bye Big Bird, Amtrak. They want to kill Amtrak. I never quite understood what they had against Amtrak, but, you know, war on trains, real Americans sit in traffic. Also, of course, they want to kill NPR. The latte-drinking Volvo drivers who like NPR. Or worse, the latte-drinking train riders who listen to NPR. The culture war era conspiracy theories about black helicopters and a one-world government secretly pursued by America's elites. That stuff is back from the culture war eras, too. The new Republican head of the House Foreign Affairs Committee convened the first hearing of that committee this week. What's the topic? Get the U.S. out of the UN. Yeah, the chairman of the Republican Study Committee, supposedly the big policy brain trust of the Republican Party. What does he want to prioritize now that Republicans are in control? He wants to prioritize banning gay marriage in Washington, D.C. Because remember, jobs, jobs, jobs. When First Lady Michelle Obama invited as her guests to the State of the Union the heroes of the Tucson gun massacre and Iraq and Afghanistan veterans and inspirational small business owners, who did Speaker of the House John Boehner invite as his guests? He invited a large group of Catholic school children as his guests to signify his top priority, which is replacing Washington, D.C. public schools with vouchers for private schools. Through a quirk of American representational injustice, Congress has basically dictatorial powers over the city of Washington, D.C. It's what happens specifically to Washington, D.C. as a city, critical to what happens to the country's economy, to jobs, jobs, jobs in the rest of the country? Not particularly. It's one city. But the new Speaker of the House, his main priority is changing the school district of Washington, D.C. His main priority, what he chose to highlight on State of the Union night, is how he wants to change how kids in one American city go to school. The first priority for the Republican Study Committee is what the civil marriage rules are for the few 100,000 people who live in this one city in Washington, D.C. This is the jobs, jobs, jobs agenda for the whole country. Republicans say what they've got is a jobs, jobs, jobs agenda for the whole country. But what they've got is a symbolic culture war agenda targeting poor defenseless D.C. as a sort of showcase for this year's version of Isn't Murphy Brown awful for being a single mom? For this year's version of AIDS is God's punishment? For this year's version of Hate Thy Neighbor, circa RNC 1992. What's being told to the country at large about Republican politics now, by the Beltway media and by Republicans themselves, is that the culture wars are over and now Republicans are all about the economy. When they talk to their own conservative audiences, though, and when they act, it is clear that the culture war is alive and well. I'll give you one last example. In March 2009, RNC Chairman Michael Steele told GQ magazine this on the issue of abortion. He said, quote, "You can choose life or you can choose abortion. I think that's an individual choice." Now, if the culture wars are over, then expressing a rather libertarian, down-the-middle view about abortion rights like that, a view that's pretty much in keeping with where the American people are on that, pretty much. That should not have made a ripple if the culture wars are over.